So, Jesse, I've got one thing to ask you, of course. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been thinking about rapid fire all day, so I think we should get started.
I'm glad it's occupied a good place in your brain today. So maybe it's because the weather is getting a little bit better outside. I can see a little sunshine out your window, and we've got it out ours here today. Fill in the blank on this first one. After Notre Dame went 9-4 last season, and of course that includes a bowl win, the 9, with Drew Pyne and Tyler Buchner at quarterback. It's blank that their current Las Vegas over/under win total for the season is 8.5.
It's outrageous that the Vegas over under has the win total for this season at 8.5, especially if you're considering a potential bowl matchup as well. And I'll tell you why, because Notre Dame has gotten better, in my opinion, every aspect or every facet of the game or of their game. So, on offense, they're seeing an upgrade, obviously, at quarterback and Sam Hartman, someone who is far more experienced and has more skill than Pyne and Tyler Buchner. And then you look at the weapons around him, I think you're going to see an obvious upgrade at the wide receiver position in terms of production. The running back room is with Estime and company is going to be, I think, if not the same, a little bit better this season because Sam Hartman is going to naturally improve the run game with a bigger threat in the pass game. The offensive line, I think, is still going to be very well. And then we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. I think the defensive line is going to have a ton of depth this season. The linebackers are going to have more experience playing in a defense, a second year under Al Golden. And then the secondary is going to be another bright spot for the team. So I think they get better at every position. I don't think they regress at any position. And the most important position, obviously, quarterback, they're taking a big step. So I just find it outrageous. There's no way, in my opinion, unless something goes wrong, that win total should be at 8.5.
See, and the quarterback thing is why you would expect this would at least a bump up to like 9.5 this year
Right.
instead of 8.5. Because again, you're going from Drew Pyne, the majority of the season, Tyler Buchner, 3 games of the season, beginning and end. They went 8-4 during the regular season. So we should actually, just drop off number 9 because the 8.5 only pertains to the 12 games during the regular season, not the bowl game. So, technically, if you're Vegas, they were 8-4. So, what they're saying is, are they going to have the same record or worse? Or are they going to be one win better? And, just like last year, it should come down to 3 games. They won one of the 3 games.
Pretty equal as well.
That's exactly right. They won one of the 3 last year, and the 3, of course, being, the Clemson that they won. They lost USC. They lost Ohio State. 2 close games. So to me, because again, I know everyone wants to yell Notre Dame bias and, all that kind of stuff, but this is Las Vegas. Like the Vegas guy, like the lines don't have bias because their only mission in Vegas is what? To make money on both sides of the line, right? So
right.
To me, when you look at the massive upgrade you're going to have at quarterback with Sam Hartman this year and all the other stuff that you outlined there, this has to have more to do with Vegas questioning Marcus Freeman as a head coach, I think. Wouldn't you? Because
basing it off of that,
it boils down to they lost to Marshall and Stanford last year. And so it seems like Vegas has questions about, is Marcus Freeman the kind of head coach that can win the games that he's supposed to win?
And I agree with that because I do think that it comes down to is Marcus Freeman going to take the step as a head coach? Is he going to eliminate the games that he shouldn't that he lost last year that he shouldn't lose again this year? So obviously being, Marshall and Stanford, is he going to have repeat mulligans this year? Is he going to lose to 1 or 2 potential teams
right.
that he shouldn't lose to?
Yeah. Exactly. Is he going to slip up again? Again, massive slip up. I think even more so Stanford than Marshall. You can forgive maybe Marshall, a little bit game 2, still breaking in a quarterback, all that stuff, even though Marshall did not turn out to be good. They obviously, they peaked with Notre Dame. Let's put it that way. It didn't last very long. Everyone was like, ooh, high on Marshall now after that win over Notre Dame. Didn't last long. That was a horrible win or a horrible loss. Stanford was a horrible loss. when I was saying you can kind of forgive Stanford maybe a little bit more. It's like you get one of those early in the season, but then Stanford, man, that's where, again, like you thought you had the corner turned. Really, though, when you look at how the season ended, even though they didn't play as well as they could have against USC, it was still a quality opponent. They beat a solid, fairly evenly matched SEC opponent in South Carolina. So they were at least trending in the right direction. But I just, again, 8.5 when you've got the quarterback with the most touchdown passes and wins in college football on your team this season, it seems like this has to have more to do with who the head coach is than who the quarterback is or anyone out there on the field this season. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame has discontinued its long-running Interhall tackle football program due to declining numbers and a high number of participants who had no prior organized tackle football experience before playing in the Interhall League.
To me, it's lame that Notre Dame is discontinuing the Interhall tackle football program. And I think that it can't really, it's lame that they're canceling it, but I don't necessarily know what they can do when you have declining numbers. And obviously students who have never played prior tackle football before. But I think that is what drew a lot of these people in is, you're at a university where football is considered its top sport, its top program. And I think a lot of people are like, hey, I've never played football before, but they might know a lot about football, or maybe we're not, what's the word? Maybe a little timid, a little scared, because I mean, obviously Notre Dame is a high academic institution. And so you have a lot of people who maybe didn't focus a lot of their time in high school to playing, sports or tackle football, or maybe they played, soccer, cross country, baseball, whatever it might be. And so, you can't really control what the enrollment gives you, but I think it's just lame because the program and the teams have been around for so long at Notre Dame. It's a long standing tradition that goes on at the university. So it sucks that it potentially has to come to an end, because I feel like it's just one of those, like many things at Notre Dame, is a big tradition thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. It really stinks because, like, I remember, moving here 20 plus years ago, and it's like, wow, Notre Dame, like, not only do they have an intramural program, they have a tackle football
Yeah.
program.
Most places it's just going to be flag football.
Yeah, exactly. And that is actually kind of what it sounds like is replacing it, because you've got overall numbers dropped. 6 years ago, they had 370 participants. To this year, apparently, they had 269. So it's dropped by about 100 in a 6-year stretch. And there's like, what, 17, I think, male residence halls over at Notre Dame. So like when you do the math on that, if you've got like 269 overall, and you've got that would give you around, like, if you're going to have 30 players per team, that's about 9 teams that you could field. So that's almost half the resident, so they're already probably were combining residence halls, whereas, in the past, each residence hall probably had its own team. But again, when you look at almost half of the people who were playing had never played organized tackle football before. I mean, that's, like, you grew up playing tackle football, so this was a problem you never had, but like trying to ensure safety, I would think, has got to be a bit of an issue when you've got that many people who have never played any level of tackle football before. And, let's be honest, it's much easier for someone who hasn't played football to play on a flag team, just like it's easier for someone who hasn't played baseball before to play on a beer league softball team. It's like, they're similar sports, but they're different. There's no contact, really in flag football. And that seems to be where the numbers are going. A 42% increase in flag football participation, while you've got a declining number in the tackle
About
side.
30% is what I came up with in my head.
Yeah. So, I mean, it stinks because of the long running tradition, how long this has been around. But, I think these numbers also kind of mimic what's going on really across the country as well. You've got fewer people, fewer guys playing tackle football in high schools as well. The numbers there are dwindling as all, stuff comes out about concussions and, just the risk of different injuries and, all these different things. So it stinks because it had been a tradition at Notre Dame for so long. Maybe they'll miss it in a few years and someone will try to bring it back. But it's, and I remember like when we'd be over there, doing like media, like in October, we'd be interviewing players and stuff like that. And you'd see some of the guys out there with their full pads and football pants carrying their helmets, back after practice and stuff like that. It's like misting in October in South Bend. That was just always kind of cool to see those guys. It stinks we won't be able to see that anymore. So the ACC and the Big Ten are ditching divisions this year. Do you buy or sell? It will make those conferences more interesting.
That's a big buy for me because when you separate conferences into divisions, ultimately the divisions, it's basically two conferences within the same conference because the divisions really ultimately play only their divisions. There might be like a game or two crossover, and then obviously you'll play each other in the Big Ten or ACC championship, depending on who comes out of each division. And so why I like that is I think you get more diversity in the schedule and you get teams playing each other that haven't really been playing each other as much over the years. Like you'll see, it's just not going to be the same Penn State, Michigan State, Ohio State, Michigan all playing each other out for the bloody side of the East,
right,
and compared to a weaker West. And then ultimately you're going to see a better Big Ten championship game overall because it no longer just does the team on the West get an automatic bid into the championship. And so I just think it makes for a better schedule overall. You're going to see more teams play each other within the conference, and then I think it ultimately will yield a better conference championship as well, because you're not just giving a spot to a team that played in the weaker side of the conference, and that's ultimately what the Big Ten comes down to. I mean, look at the Big Ten championship the last couple of years, and watching Michigan wax whoever came out of the West, and that's a predominant pattern through the Big Ten over the years. Is typically the East stomps the West, and the West has no reason belonging in the Big Ten championship.
And that's obviously the ultimate goal of this whole thing, is to get better matchups in the conference championship game. So like you might get Ohio State versus Michigan twice, or Penn State might
no
slip
longer
in
is
there.
Northwestern or Iowa sneaking in there.
Exactly. And that's, for those schools, it, ultimately the entire season might not be as interesting, but at least, like you said, the consolation prize is at least the schedule is going to be a little bit fresher. You're going to start to see some different teams on a more regular basis. I think it's like every 4 years is supposed to, you're supposed to play, I think, every team a home and home in every 4-year period, so, like for the ACC, for both of them, really, their goal was to get the two best teams in the conference championship game. And that also gives them the best chance to get multiple teams in the college football playoff, especially now that the playoff is going to be expanding next year, so that'll help. But like for the immediate future, again, it's like Ohio State, Michigan, the race is basically going to be, can anyone knock one of those two teams
I was going to say,
out of the
so
conference championship
do you think
game?
that with the with the playoff expanding, I don't think this is going to be too big of an issue, but if we had this current, Big Ten no longer divisions 5 years ago, do you think that it would penalize someone like Michigan, Ohio State? Say, Michigan beats them in the regular season and then goes on to beat them again in the championship. Now you have two losses to the same team. Would that have penalized them? You know what I mean? Because you have two losses technically, but it's to the same opponent who ultimately is also going to the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good point. You're going to have probably more of that, or that, at best case scenario, you're going to split. Well, not best case. Best case is you go 2-0 if you're one of those two teams. But for like the chances of your conference, I guess best case is you're going to split. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If it were around 5 years ago, it definitely would have hurt one of the, like one of those two teams.
So I wonder if that plays a part of it in the playoff expansion. Are they more comfortable with it because knowing that, what is it? Is it a 12-team format?
But it's gonna, you're gonna have at-large bids anyway. I
Right.
think it's the 6 conference champions are guaranteed spots, and then the rest are going to at-large bids. So I think if you have to play a team twice, then the question is going to be like, did you split? If you go 0-2, obviously, if you lose another game beyond those, you're not making you're not going to make a good case for yourself. But how close and how competitive were those 2 games? But I think that you're definitely still going to be in the conversation, even if you lose 2 games, as potentially being like the 11 or 12 seed
Right.
kind of thing. The ACC, they just want to get some kind of good game out
Yeah,
of
the
it.
ACC is even more lopsided than the Big Ten most of the time. The
I
only time
know.
it was pretty fair is when Notre Dame joined the conference for a
Yeah,
year.
exactly. And that was they went with that system that year, and that's you got Clemson or Notre Dame playing in the conference championship game, and really it wasn't the best conference championship game, but in terms of the way that season played out, it was probably, even though it was played COVID conditions and all that different kind of stuff, it's probably the best, one of the better regular seasons the ACC's had in a while because they had Notre Dame in there.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because it's basically been you could pretty much all but guarantee Clemson was going to end up winning their division, and then who was going to come out of the other division to play him. I think it's definitely going to be much more competitive for those 2 spots in the ACC than it probably is in the Big Ten. Because again, Big Ten, it's like the season's going to start with Michigan and Ohio State, and then can Penn State beat one of them? Can Iowa? Like Wisconsin? Can one of these other teams end up sneaking in there and knock one of them out? Speaking of conferences and schedules and all that kind of stuff, the SEC released its 2024 football, not their schedule, but their opponents. Here's what Texas and Oklahoma's first slates are going to look like in their first season in the SEC next year, of course, 2024. Texas is going to have Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, and Mississippi State at home. They're going to be at Arkansas, at Texas A&M, at Vanderbilt, and of course a neutral site game with Oklahoma. As for Oklahoma, they get the neutral site game with Texas. They'll also play Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee at home. They will travel to Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, Missouri. What do you think of those 2 schedules? Welcome to the SEC, Texas and Oklahoma.
That's kind of exactly my answer. What I think of these schedules are welcome to the SEC. This is what you asked for. Are you going to sink or swim in this first season? Because you look at both of these schedules. I mean, Texas has Florida, Georgia. I want to assume Texas A&M will be in a better place by 2024. Mississippi State is always, a pretty solid team. Arkansas is no pushover these days. I mean, I guess you could say the weaker. I mean, Kentucky too. Kentucky's not a pushover, and it's Texas and Oklahoma obviously is a long-standing rivalry. I mean, if you look at that, to me, Vanderbilt and Kentucky are the games I guess you're most looking forward to. But even those, I'm not like, wow, these are pushovers. I mean, this is a tough schedule, and it is way different than the Big 12, I have to say. And then you go on to, Oklahoma, and it's like you got Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, all really hard teams. South Carolina was good last year. Missouri is the only team on that schedule where I'd be like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good about this one. But I just feel like both of these teams are quickly going to realize that maybe they bit off a little bit more than they can chew. And I know it's not the program itself. It's the universities wanting to, make the change. But
yep.
I think it's going to be a rough transition with these first year SEC schedules, because looking at both of those, majority of those opponents are tough, and they are not going to be it is just not going to be what it was like in the Big 12.
I saw Brian Curtis from The Ringer tweet this last night when he saw it, and this is a great point. Texas, like Penn State, we talked last week when we predicted the Penn State, what Penn State is going to do this season. They've been in the Big Ten for 30 years, and they are the only team in the Big Ten that did not protect a game. Like, they have no protected rivalry games, as the Big Ten goes to its new format next year. So they've been out there for 30 years, no rivalries they've developed, to speak of, I guess, that they want to keep around anyway. in the Big Ten. And that's typically what happens. Like you switch conferences, whatever, and you say goodbye to some of your rivals, just like Missouri said goodbye to Kansas and Kansas State. And of course, Texas A&M said goodbye to Texas in some of those schools. Texas is the opposite. They're going to get to play Arkansas and Texas A&M, which are two old traditional rivalries from them, like going back to the Southwestern Conference days. They're actually going to get to reunite with some old rivals by changing conferences. That doesn't happen very often, that you change conferences and you actually get to face
new
more rivals. Yeah, you get to face, like those old rivals as a result.
I forgot about how much that Texas and Arkansas matchup used to be back in the day.
Yeah, back in the Darrell Royal days. And yeah, that's exactly right. And, the other interesting thing, of course, is how the SEC, subtly, maybe not so subtly, Texas is going to play Georgia. Oklahoma is going to play Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean,
the split. It's like they kind of went, they had like a draft. Okay, you get this one, you get this one, you get this one, you get this one.
That's right. Here's Alabama's schedule. They're going to play Auburn, Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I don't think Nick Saban's probably very happy about that schedule.
Well, I mean, you saw everything that came out, I think, last week, right? Like the SEC basically dumbed down their schedule by a game. They allowed
by not playing 9 games. That's right.
Right.
They're keeping this 8-game format. So
I just think that stinks, by the way. I don't know if you talked about that prior, but that just stinks to me because you already have the SEC already has an FCS opponent every year that they just wax, right? And so when you take off another SEC opponent, to me that feels like now you have 2 games that are really just track meets for you. You're just putting them on the schedule and guaranteeing yourself a win.
School's looking at this because, here's what Georgia's going to play next year: Auburn, Florida, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Texas. And this is the 8-game schedule. So there are no coaches who are going to get these 8-game schedules and go, yeah, we need to go to 9 games, after this. They're just not going to do it. Tennessee gets Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt. So Tennessee has to play both Alabama and Georgia next season. And then Oklahoma and
Does Tennessee
Florida
get LSU as well? Because that would be
no LSU.
No LSU. If any SEC team has Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, that triangle of opponents, I feel bad for you.
Here's LSU's schedule: Alabama, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt. Those are the home games. At Arkansas, at Florida, at South Carolina, at Texas A&M. I mean, that's not an easy schedule either. I'm sure you look across that conference, and there are not going to be too many easy slates in the SEC. And again, that's why
every year
nobody wants to go to 9.
Saban and Kirby Smart make it look pretty easy, but it is not easy.
Nope, not at all. Let's see how easy this is as we pick another team's record for the upcoming season. It's Oregon today. They've got a Vegas over-under of 9.5 wins this season. Seems like every team we do has an over-under of 9.5. But here we go. So here's their schedule: Portland State, Texas Tech, Hawaii, Colorado. Those are all home games, by the way. 4 home games in a row against that slate for Oregon to start off. At Stanford, at Washington, Washington State, at Utah. So they play 3 of 4 on the road. Then they go Cal, USC, at Arizona State, Oregon State. So over under 9.5 wins for Oregon this season.
First, before we get in this, I just want to make the comment. I would love to be, I don't know how Oregon did it, but I would love to have 8 home games and 4 road games in one season. I feel like that's like a very distinct advantage right off the bat.
Let me see if I can find this real quick. Make sure. Go ahead.
But if we're looking at, the way I like to do these with you is I like to go opponent by opponent.
Sure.
And then we just kind of, say what we think win or loss. I think it's pretty Portland State, first and foremost, is an easy one. That's a win right off the bat.
That's a win.
Texas Tech I have as a win.
It's a win.
Hawaii I have as a win.
It's a win.
Colorado I have as a win. So we're started, 4 home games, 4 wins, and then you go at Stanford. That's a win for me as well.
I think so too.
And then I think they pick up their first loss in their first true road match at Washington.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the
Those
question
are
is
evenly matched
between
teams.
right between Oregon and Washington. One of those two teams is going to come out, at least 10 wins, and the other
Yes.
is
And I
going to
think
be
it'll largely
the
due
under.
to that game.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I'm looking here. Actually, I was mistaken. They go to Texas Tech. So they don't start off with 4 at home. They go to Texas Tech.
Okay.
Let me make sure everything else. Yeah, everything else matches up. So it's only
Still
it's only the
7-5.
Texas
It's
Tech
not
game.
6-6. They still get one more extra home game compared to road games. So
Right. Right.
all right. So at Washington is a loss. So at this point, I have them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
And they lost
6, 5
They
and
lost that
1.
one by a field goal last year, by the way,
Okay. At
against
home, I'm
Washington.
assuming
At
too.
home. Yeah, that's right.
So Washington State, I have them recovering and beating them.
Go win.
Utah is a toss-up, and I'll explain later.
Yeah, that
That's
was a
I think
close one. They won that one by a field goal last year. So you want to
so.
save
That's
that for the end?
yes. That's a
Okay,
win or loss for me.
right.
Cal is a definite win.
W.
USC is a definite loss.
Agree.
And then at Arizona State is a definite win.
Yeah. Arizona State, by the way, with an over-under of 4.5 for the
Oof.
Fighting Drew Pines. So, mhm.
And then Oregon State is another toss-up to me. So this is where
So
they definitely have 2 losses, and they are definitely at 8 wins. They're at 8-2. And I think between Utah and Oregon State, they split those 2. That's why I wanted to hold it till the end. And so I don't think they win both of those. I don't think they lose both of those. They split and go 9-3. So my 9.5 wins. I'm gonna have to take the under because I think they split between Oregon State and Utah.
I agree with that. I like the way that you break it all down like that because I absolutely agree. I think that those two are probably toss ups, and based on what we have so far, like they didn't have to play USC last year. They remember they got blown out by Georgia to start the season, but then they ripped off 8 straight wins. Their best win in that stretch was over UCLA, which had made it to the top 10 at that point. But then they lose to Washington, they lose to Oregon State, lost 2 of their last 3 at the end of the regular season. Utah, though, was one of the wins. And I just think because the Pac 12 has, it's like they've got the teams that are going to make them the most money, and they've got them all playing each other this year. They've got Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Utah basically all playing each other this year. And I just don't think there's any way that a team like Oregon is going to be able to survive a gauntlet like that. And I agree. I think that they end up 9-3 this season.
Very nice.
Yep.
Some might say great minds think alike.
That's right. All right. Last question tonight. Oakland A's fans staged a protest during the A's home game at the Coliseum this week. They stood silent for the first batter of the 5th inning, and then they broke into a chant of "Sell the team" that was so loud. The Oakland pitcher, they've got like he had to call timeout because he couldn't hear the pitch call they were trying to call through his earpiece. He wasn't sure if the earpiece was broken. It was so loud. So this is part of the fan base's 11th hour attempt to keep the A's from moving to Vegas. What do you think about what's going on out there in Oakland right now?
So here's the situation with what I got with my feelings in Oakland. Back in the day, and this is from my understanding, I've been listening. I watched a lot of baseball games, and a lot of broadcasters, especially this past week, have been talking about what's going on in Oakland, and specifically, I watch a lot of Cubs games. So Marquee Network is Buchner. And recently, they've been doing a lot of Joe Torre. He's actually been on the Marquee Network a lot, and he's been doing games with Buchner. And Boog was asking him, back in the day, what was your experience with, playing in Oakland? Is it comparable to what's going on now? And he basically said, I used to love playing back in the day in Oakland. It was one of my favorite places to go. The fans were always supportive, et cetera, et cetera. I think what's going on there is a complicated situation. I think that the fan base itself has declined, and I understand wanting to move. I think also ownership and management has let that stadium crumble to something that is not playable, and I think that's a disservice to the fans. So I think both of those kind of go against each other. And I ultimately feel bad for the fans too, because this is now two sports franchises that are going to be leaving. The first being the Golden State Warriors and now the Oakland A's. But at the same time, I don't feel bad because Oakland has proven that is no longer a market that professional sports teams can sustain. And when you're in the business of running a professional sports team, you're going to move your nice new stadium to a place that is going to generate a lot more money. And the fans are going to come no matter what. And that's not proven in Oakland. And so while it sucks for the fans, it's a business. And I think in a business term, it makes a lot more sense to build a brand new nice stadium in Vegas, because look at all these new stadiums that are going up in Vegas and doing well. The Raiders' new stadium, the Golden Knights, the hockey that just won the Stanley Cup. I mean, everything is shown that it is proven to work in Vegas. And, no matter how vanilla it is and how basic and easy it is to say, hey, we're just going to drop another team in Vegas, it's working. The business model is working.
It's a popular market for a reason.
Exactly. It sucks for the fans. But if you were really concerned the last 30 years, you wouldn't have let it get to this situation, I think.
Well, but at the same time, I still think there's more on not even the ownership. It's run like a bargain basement team, but it's a small market. Like they dropped radio broadcasts, I think, for a little bit a few years ago, or they tried to anyway. It's like it's a very tough market to be in. But the biggest issue from an ownership standpoint is the stadium, and they've been trying for years to get a new stadium out there in Oakland, but they can't get the public funds, like the tax money. They're not able to get any of that, no matter how much they've tried. They've looked at different parts, like going south down toward San Jose and that area, but they're going to get the public funds in Las Vegas. It's what it's going to come down to. They're not going to get as much public funds in Vegas as they thought they were going to get, but they're going to get it. And if you can get over $350 million, I think it is, in public money to move to another city, rather than have to shell out potentially $1 billion on your own as an ownership group, of course you're going to do it. There's some fan apathy, I'm sure, but I think the biggest issue facing Oakland is just that they've wanted for years and years and years to get some help to build a new stadium, and they've just never been able to get the help to do it. And so what other choice do you have? Because of what you said, it's like Las Vegas is prospering right now with pro sports cities, and that's it. It just really doesn't seem like there's another option for the A's if they want to stay alive.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think if the team wants to, not essentially die out, they got to find a spot where they can prosper and grow. Essentially, they can't keep declining or staying at the rate that they're at. And I think no matter what in Vegas, they know people are always in Vegas. Even if you're not an A's fan, people are going to come just as tourists. People are going to use it as business opportunities to take clients. There's just so many more opportunities to go to a baseball game in Vegas than there is in Oakland. I think that's ultimately the driving factor.
And again, it's a endless catch-22, like from the ownership standpoint, because if the owners, I talked about their bargain basement, and we all know about Billy Beane and the origins of Moneyball and all that kind of stuff. But like if you have a stadium with better luxury suites and amenities and all those different kind of things, you have more money. And theoretically, then if you're generating more money from those kind of things, the corporate dollars and all that kind of stuff, then you're able to actually go out and spend more money. They can't do it in Oakland. The hope, obviously, from their perspective, is that they can do it in Las Vegas. It just sucks from a fan standpoint, because it's not just the Raiders and the A's that they've lost. The Warriors only moved across the bay, but they're in San Francisco now. They used to be right there as well.
They've lost all three, and it's very unfortunate for the fans. But I mean, like we all know, last night I was watching it. again, Bugshiambi, Joe Torre just brought up a good point. No matter the players and personnel, yes, it's a game to them and they take the game very seriously, but the game is produced to a market. It's a business. And that's why they had to make all these rule changes, is because you can play the game, but if no one is watching, then what does it matter? If no one's coming to games and it's not exciting, what does it matter? And so that's why you saw a lot of these rule changes. And that's ultimately what's going to take the A's from Oakland to Vegas. It's a business and you got to be able to generate revenue.
Yep. Just good stuff tonight. Enjoy your night. We will talk to you tomorrow when Vince and you and I are all in here. Thanks for joining us this evening. Hit the like button on your way out. And of course, you know what to do. Subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks to Notre Dame men's lacrosse coach Kevin Corrigan, who joined us earlier to talk national championship. Don't forget Micah Shrewsbury coming up next week. But if you didn't hear Coach Corrigan tonight, you can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, Neil Ivey was on with us last week as well, and you can find that there as well. Jess, talk to you tomorrow. Ivy Nation Sports Talk.